that I hope will stick. Sing it to all those motherfuckers like to suck your dick.
Officer friendly, gonna kill your motherfucking ass dead.
Hell yeah!
A taser, a boot, a bullet to your motherfucking head. The gang all joins in. A murder but no goddamn sin. Believe your eyes or what you are fed. With me now, officer friendly, gonna kill your motherfucking ass dead. A taser, a boot, a bullet to your motherfucking head. The gang all joins in. A murder but no goddamn sin. Believe your eyes or what you are fed.
Eat, fuck, kill.
Eat, fuck, kill. Eat, fuck, kill.
Good day, and thanks for stopping by. This is the premiere broadcast of the Eat, Fuck, Kill podcast, and we're glad that you're here to enjoy it. My name is Massavana Satori Wabi-Sabi, and I am your host for this, the first of many podcasts of Eat, Fuck, Kill. Today, for the first broadcast, we're going to do today's first show a little differently than we're going to do almost everyone that follows it, in that there's a topic I very much want to talk about, but before I can get to it in the kind of terms that I want to get to it in, I feel like I have to give a little background on these topics so that when I get to the crux of it and here in some following podcasts, you'll understand why I say, feel, and think the things that I do. So let's talk about the motherfucking church. Let's talk about the motherfucking church. And let's talk about the church as it specifically relates to the things going on in the world around us right now. Specifically, I want to talk about the church as it relates to the protests in the street and the racial injustice and straight out tyranny that black folks in this country have had to deal with as long as they done been here. And I know I'm not alone in saying that I'm fucking tired of seeing it. I've been tired of seeing it for a decade. And I'm going to express to you here over the next few weeks how I think we got to where we are. And I'm going to do that by first kind of visiting some historical aspects of this that kind of brings it into what I consider to be a very pertinent focus, because it's very difficult to look at the terrorism and the tyranny in the streets that you see today without putting it into some historical context. Why is it like it is, and how did it get that way, and where does it come from? And these are all pertinent questions that I'd like to take a look at and that I have opinions on, important or very strong opinions on, I'll say. So back to the church. Let's first start by, I want to talk to you about papal bulls or papal bulls, depending on who you ask. And frankly, I don't, and I want to start by telling you what a papal bull is. It's a church decree or edict or a charter, and it's issued strictly by the Pope. And it is sealed with the raised seal of the church. And it essentially, whatever's written within these papal bulls, and they're each given individual names, becomes church edict law. And I want to start talking about the church through the lens first of a papal bull that they released going all the way back to 1454. Yes, you heard me right, 1454. And that's the papal bull, the Bull Romanus Pontifex. Now, I'm going to quote for you here in a moment some of the information contained within this papal bull, Bull Romanus Pontifex. And I want you to understand that it's written by the church in 1454. So that gives you an idea of like the dry, kind of trifling ass language that they use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a summary of this papal bull, or a portion of a summary of this papal bull. And then I'm going to share a link both on the screen and in the comments that will show you where to go to get this information directly and to credit the people who summarized this papal bull. The Bull Romanus Pontifex, quote, issued by Pope Nicholas V to King Alonso V of Portugal, which declared war upon all non-Christians worldwide. He specifically sanctioned and promoted the conquest, colonization, and exploitation of all non-Christians and their lands under their control. All non-Christians were labeled as enemies of the Catholic faith and as such less than human. In the Bull of 1454, Pope Nicholas directed King Alonso to capture, vanquish, and subdue the Saracens, pagans, and other enemies of Christ, and to, quote, put them into perpetual slavery and to take all their possessions and property. So here we are in 1454, and the church is declaring war upon everything that wasn't white and Christian. Now, it was about 40 years later, and you have to keep in mind in the 1450s, information and actions took longer. Information traveled slowly, and ideas as well. So the idea that the church declared war in 1454 doesn't mean that they were going to then go out and stick 100,000 troops on some ships and send them across the ocean. That's not how it worked. They didn't even know where the people were they were declaring war on. So about 50 years later, on May the 4th of 1493, Pope Alexander VI followed up this Bull Romanus Pontifex, which declared war on all things not white and Christian the whole world over, followed it up with another papal bull. This papal bull is known as the Inter Caetera papal bull. And I'm tempted to just let you look at the text in its entirety of this papal bull, because it is some downright trifling shit. It is just a horribly desensitized document that's disengaged from reality at every turn. It is some straight funky shit. Written by the church in 1493. And this was all part of the inspiration for the war that they declared in 1454. And here they are. They're going to send their first soldiers out in this war that they declared. And that's the purpose of this papal bull Inter Caetera, is to send forward soldiers to other lands as a part of this declaration of war. I'm going to spare you the dry-ass language of this papal bull, and I'm just going to cut out a few excerpts here and share them with you. And keep in mind, this is written in 1493, so, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1492, blah, blah, blah. So this is just after he got there and started learning a thing or two. We have indeed learned that you, this is the church talking within this papal bull, we have indeed learned that you, who for a long time had intended to seek out and, quote, discover certain islands and mainlands, remote and unknown and not hitherto discovered by others, to the end that you might bring to the worship of our Redeemer and the profession of the Catholic faith to their residents and inhabitants. Now, first of all, how do you discover remote and unknown islands with residents and inhabitants? That shows you right there, like the mindset that they had, that the people they were finding weren't really people and didn't matter in any way to them. A little further on in this trifling document spilled by your church, and they at length, with divine aid and with the utmost diligence, sailing in the ocean sea, discovered certain very remote islands and even mainlands that hitherto had not been discovered by others, wherein dwell very many peoples living in peace, and as reported, going unclothed and not eating flesh. How do you discover some place with residents and inhabitants where you yourself say you're discovering a place where dwells very many peoples living in peace? I mean, that is a certain kind of ignorance to reality that's just, man, that is some top shelf horse shit there. And the church's goal was to pretty much find everything that wasn't white and wasn't Christian, and either make it Christian or make it dead. And therefore, with this Inter se terra papal bull sent forth was Christopher Columbus upon the Americas. There's one final section of the papal bull, and then it's too funky to go on. And this again is the church talking to, in this case, Columbus. We have our own motion, and of course King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. We have our own motion, and not at your solicitation do give, concede, and assign forever to you and your successors all the islands and mainlands discovered, and which may hereafter be discovered towards the west and south, whether they may be situated towards India or towards any other part whatsoever, and give you absolute power in them. This is the church telling Ferdinand and Isabella, along with Columbus, that anything they discover is theirs, and they can do with it what they want, and they have absolute power in them. As if it was the church's, within the church's authority to do this. Now, we already know a lot of the history of the trifling, miserable, awful shit that Christopher Columbus pulled upon arriving here. And for that matter, what his purpose was. One of the things that Columbus did when he arrived here is he created something called El Requirimiento, or the requirement. And the requirement was ultimately given to almost each native resident, sometimes generally in writing, but oftentimes also written to them or spoken to them, but in languages they didn't speak or read. And this requirement was essentially telling all of the native inhabitants exactly what was expected of them, and if they didn't agree to it, what would happen to them. And here is some text from the requirement. And again, this is what Columbus brought to as part of his war-making effort sent by the church. Wherefore, as best we can, we ask and require you that you consider what we have said to you, and that you take the time that shall be necessary to understand and deliberate upon it, and that you acknowledge the church as the ruler and superior of the whole world. But if you do not do this, and maliciously make delay in it, I certify to you that, with the help of God, we shall powerfully enter into your country and shall make war against you in all ways and manners that we can, and shall subject you to the yoke and obedience of the church and of their highness. We shall take from you and your wives and your children and make slaves of them, and as such shall sell and dispose of them as their highness may command. And we shall take away your goods, and shall do to you all the mischief and damage that we can, as to vassals who do not obey, and refuse to receive their Lord, and resist and contradict him. And we protest that the deaths and losses which shall accrue from this are your fault, and not that of their highness or ours, nor of these cavaliers who come with us. So there you have it. Do and say exactly what we think, or we'll kill you and turn you into slaves perpetually and steal everything from you. But we love you, and Christ loves you. This is another one of those instances of God being used as the cloak for awful men and their awful deeds. Now, if you wanted to know what, a little deeper and more personally, what it was that these godly people were really looking for and what they sought, Columbus, who many of his letters to and from King Ferdinand over the years after 1492, we have record of. Here's an excerpt from a letter that Columbus wrote to the king and queen in 1503. Gold is most excellent. Gold is treasure. And he who possesses it does all he wishes to in this world. Here we are in 1500. 520 years ago, and already they were learning that if you got the bills, you got the power, which is still to this very day the case, strangely enough, and I'm sure that's a coincidence. And he who possesses it does all he wishes to in this world. They were chasing cash, and they wanted to have it all because they knew if they got it all, they'd run everything. Doesn't that sound unusual? Here's another short excerpt from a letter Columbus wrote to the king and queen. I quote, "Their highness may see that I shall give them as much gold as they need, and slaves as many as they shall order to be shipped." This is your loving and just God and your loving and just church, essentially declaring war on the entire world that wasn't them, and then going about executing that war through this requirement, this, we will murder you if you don't do what we say, and we're going to say it in a language you don't speak. And we already know how this plays out and how this ends. And happy Columbus Day, of course. You can look at your 2020 calendar, and all the way to this very day, that murderous, rapinist, trifling ass Columbus is still a national holiday. Some people have started to change it over the last 10 years, 15, 20 years, whatever it is, to Indigenous People Days, or celebrate it in other ways with the removal of Columbus's name. But overwhelmingly, it's still out there, Columbus Day. We celebrate this murderer, this warmonger who wanted to make slaves of everyone on earth that wasn't Christian and white. And we to this day celebrate him. Now, to a large degree, I imagine that's because a lot of folks don't really know who Columbus is, and they hear a holiday and what do they care? There's a whole bunch of people who do know and don't care that we celebrate a racist, race war fighting monster. And his entire story that was taught to many people, that the whole, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and he discovered America. Yeah, a whole lot of bullshit in the Columbus story, and they left a whole lot out. And that's why they were able to have a Columbus Day still to this day on your calendar, even though he's an enormous sack of shit. There's not enough people know he's an enormous sack of shit, or for that matter, even care. So Columbus arrives in America, starts his little race war on the Americas, I guess we could call it too. And you might say, well, how does Columbus and his race war in the 1490s and 1500s, how does that make any difference today? His little church-declared race war all the way back then, how does that matter today? And for that, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go forward here from 1490s, 1500, and Columbus's time with his church-declared war. And at this point, I'd like to read to you an excerpt written in 1845, about 350 years after Columbus. And this excerpt I'm going to call it an extended paragraph. And I've pulled it from the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave. And he's talking about the church and the things he sees in 1845 America in the build-up to the Civil War. Here's Frederick Douglass from 1845, 350 years after Columbus. I hate the corrupt, slave-holding, women-whipping, cradle-plundering, partial and hypocritical Christianity of the land. I look upon it as the climax of all misnomers, the boldest of all frauds, and the grossest of all libels. I am filled with unutterable loathing when I contemplate the religious pomp and show, together with the horrible inconsistencies which everywhere surround me. We have men stealers for ministers, women whippers for missionaries, and cradle plunderers for church members. The man who wields the blood-clotted cowskin during the week fills the pulpit on Sunday and claims to be a minister of the meek and lowly Jesus. The slave auctioneer's bell and the church-going bell chime in with each other, and the bitter cries of the heartbroken slave are drowned in the religious shouts of his pious master. Revivals of religion and revivals in the slave trade go hand in hand together. The slave prison and the church stand near each other. The clanking of fetters and the rattling of chains in the prison and the pious psalm and solemn prayer in the church may be heard at the same time. The dealers in the bodies of men erect their stand in the presence of the pulpit, and they mutually help each other. The dealer gives his blood-stained gold to support the pulpit, and the pulpit in return covers his infernal business with the garb of Christianity. Here we have religion and robbery, the allies of each other, devils dressed in angels' robe, and hell presenting the semblance of paradise. So here we are 350 years later in 1845, right on the precipice of the Civil War, and Frederick Douglass still sees the church's hands all over the tyranny that stifled Black life and Black culture in this country since the moment they arrived here. Now, you might say now that, well, that's all the way back in the Civil War, 1845. So, okay, you could see that the church has their hands all over slavery and oppression from Christopher Columbus through the Civil War, but it's 2020 now. There can't still be a connection, can there? Shit. You must be kidding. The 13th Amendment, even when you read it, it's clear that it doesn't do what those who created it and wrote it suggested it does. Furthermore, the 13th Amendment, like everything else, every other law and agreement this country's made, going all the way back to the Constitution itself, and pretty much everything since the Declaration of Independence that's been done or accomplished in this country has always been a compromise. And the 13th Amendment was no different. It was a compromise between two sides. One side, which essentially wanted to end slavery, or at least get it out of the public view. It was these Karen-type sensitive white motherfuckers who weren't so much bothered by the concept of slavery as they were having to see it in the marketplace. Their delicate sensitivities were offended by the presence of the slave auctions in the markets. So they wanted it out of their view, and it was a compromise between those people and the abolitionists. There were plenty of folks that who saw slavery as for the awful, and obviously wrong and just horrible thing that it is. But to say that was oftentimes, particularly as a politician or someone in power, if you said that, even around the Civil War and certainly well before that, it was really the ruination of a career or any kind of substantial political career. You couldn't say abolish slavery. That was craziness. So you had this one side of abolitionists and people who just didn't want to see slavery anymore. And on the other side, you had people who loved the idea of owning humans and wanted to continue it. Some because it's how they made their money. Others because they were sick motherfuckers who just wanted something they could own and beat up on. Just miserable, awful humans who wanted to continue to own human beings and had an argument that, yeah, it's great and we should do it. So, and the 13th Amendment was a compromise between these two groups of people. But there's some additional context that I think is required as we look at the 13th Amendment. Because as the Civil War came to an end, there was one of the other compromises that was made is that President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, agreed to have Andrew Johnson, who was a racist piece of shit from Tennessee, serve as his vice president. And that was done to kind of bring the country together and have a Southern person on the ticket to try to win some Southern votes so that Lincoln could win that presidency in 1864. And it wasn't but about 2 years before Lincoln selected Andrew Johnson as his vice president that Andrew Johnson on the Senate floor argued that black folks were not equal and that that's not what the document, the all men created equal, that it didn't in fact mean black folks. And he made a long-winded argument on the Senate floor about just that topic. So after Lincoln was shot, and it was no accident that he was shot because he was shot right after the Civil War ended and they waved the white flag at Appomattox Courthouse. So at that point, they realized that they had lost the war, slavery was going away, and that Lincoln was going to change a lot of things. And as you know from history, on comes John Wilkes Booth, kills Lincoln. Now Andrew Johnson, this racist mofo, and this is right at the end of the Civil War, is going to be your new president, and he's going to decide what the world looks like post-Civil War and what the 13th Amendment was going to look like. So instead of having Lincoln kind of design Reconstruction and design what the United States was going to look like post-slavery, they murdered him and let a Tennessee racist make those decisions. And this was in 1865. Here we are in 2020, and we still haven't resolved these issues. That's more than 150 years of just unresolved bullshit. And that's 150 years of politicians afraid to say out loud that we need to fix this and fix it right. 150 years of politicians not doing shit to actually make it right. So now let me read to you what the 13th Amendment says so you can understand, because this was sold for years and years and years, and really to this day still, as the amendment that ended slavery. Let me read it to you. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And what you have here is a great compromise. Let me read to you the portion absent the commas. Then, without the portions with the commas, the 13th Amendment reads, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Now, that part of the 13th Amendment, you know who wrote that and you know who wanted that. It was the abolitionists, and it was the folks who at least were tired of looking at slavery. And that was their way, that was their portion of trying to end slavery. Now, let's look at the portion between the commas. Except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. Here's your little asterisk that says, oh no, slavery isn't done away with. It's just now you have to be convicted of a crime before we can turn you into a slave. Isn't that interesting? And that was in 1865. And you might say again, well, all right, so maybe they didn't do away with slavery and they just said that you got to be convicted of a crime first before you're a slave, but at least there wasn't going to be open and outward slavery. And I don't see that at all. What I see here is essentially a shifting of responsibility for slavery. It was shifted from the private sector, businesses and, farmers and regular folks trading their slaves in the market right down in the middle of the town. And they shifted that responsibility over to the prison industrial complex. And they said, now we're going to take the slave market out of the marketplace, and we're going to do it behind the walls of the prison system. So once they're convicted, they're going to be slaves, and we'll auction them off to you, but we're going to do it out of the sight of the public and behind the prison walls, so delicate sensitivities of these white Karens won't be offended any further. Fuck you. So there's the 13th Amendment. All right, from there you might argue, okay, well, still, we're in 1865, and while the 13th Amendment might not have done away with slavery, what does this have to do with 2020? Well, all right, let's take a look further. All right, so again, just like in 1492, the same thing holds true in 1865. There's no fucking television. There's no fucking internet. The lines of communication are slow. They move glacially. And education wasn't anything like what it was today. And there were many, many people who could not read or write and were fully illiterate. So what kind of happened post 1865 that gets us to here with this same church-inspired knee on the neck of African Americans for 450 flipping years? How did we get here? All right, let's take a look. We're going to fast forward now from 1865 to the early 1900s. And we're going to look at a guy named Andrew Mellon. Andrew Mellon was a rich robber baron from Pennsylvania, I believe. His name is all over buildings and institutions to this day. There was Mellon PSFS and Mellon Bank. There's Carnegie Mellon University. But Andrew Mellon was a robber baron in the 1920s, made money in steel, oil, everything. But one of the other things he did, like so many of the other robber barons and moneyed elites of that era, is whenever their employees, or really any employees or workers anywhere in the country, tried to go on strike or rebel, they would hire private armies to essentially massacre them. There's an entire series of massacres between like 1880 and 1920-ish, all over the country, West Virginia, New York City, Chicago, LA, and all points in between, where workers would build camps because they had nowhere to live, and they would build camps and go on strike. And then the Andrew Mellons and Andrew Carnegies and J.P. Morgans of the world would hire armies and militia, just private guns, to go into these camps and murder the workers and their families. And there's a whole series of massacres, and we're going to talk about them, if not today, in the next show, the series of massacres that took place in this country between the end of the Civil War and the early 1920s, where essentially rich folks were trying to put workers in their place. Go to work, do what we say, or we'll kill your ass in your sleep and your whole family too. And I know how harsh that sounds in 2020. You're like, come on, that shit didn't happen. It happened over and over again, about all these massacres that took place. And it was all rich white men hiring poor white men to kill poorer white and black men. And it was all about teaching workers, get up and go to work, no matter how bad it is, no matter how much you die and how painful it is and how much we ruin your life. Get up, go to work, take your 2 cents, and if you don't do it, we'll kill you. And it was a part of a subtle plan to kind of slowly kill the spirit of the American people, the 1% killing the spirit of the 99% through straight massacre. Not even murder, massacre, because they're all called massacres. I don't call them murders because, they sneak in the middle of the night with guns and murder 200 people, sleep in with their wife and kids. And then they give them Carnegie Mellon University and name banks after them and paint them in history like heroes, just like they did Columbus, Andrew Mellon. So anyway, I want to stick to Andrew Mellon. I want to get this out. Andrew Mellon. And Andrew Mellon was towards the end of his life, after he was a gajillionaire and one of the richest men, if not at the time the richest man in America. He was named the Secretary of the Treasury. And he saw, at the time, he had served, by the time he was done his period as a Secretary of Treasury, he was the longest serving Secretary of Treasury that there ever was. And I think it was about 1923 when he served under 3 different presidents as the Secretary of the Treasury. Andrew Mellon did, the Secretary of Money, you could call it. And during the early period, you might have heard of the term the Roaring Twenties. And that was referenced both in terms of the lifestyle that many people lived and also the economics of the time. The economy was booming for a certain kind of person in 1920s America, if you get my drift. And what Andrew Mellon did from the minute he came into office, and he didn't hide this, and I'm going to put some graphs up on the screen to show you this as well, because it's important to understand the minute he got into office. Now, historically, taxes on the wealthy in this country up to that point had been up over 80% and oftentimes over 90% consistently. And the minute he became Secretary of Treasury, he immediately began to lower taxes on the wealthy. And he did it a series of times. He lowered it from somewhere around 90 down to 70, from 70 down to 50, and then again from 50 down to 30. And then down and down, the taxes on the wealthy went between, say, like 1923 and 1929. And I'm sure you know what comes next. Andrew Mellon drove this country right into a fucking depression, the worst economic depression, the worst economic climate this country's ever had. And he walked us right into it over a 6-year period by essentially cutting the taxes on wealthy over and over and over, which has happened, essentially every time it's happened. And you can look at the charts of when they cut it. Because right after he cut it, he led us into the depression, and over about a 10-year period, they got the taxes on the wealthy right after the depression got raised right back up near where they started out. And they stayed there for a long time. And then they got cut again, and the same thing happened, terrible economic, same thing. Every time the taxes on the wealthy get down too low, the economy falls the fuck apart, or at least that's, for a long time, that was true. So he leads us right into the Depression in 1929. So, and now you've got a whole bunch of shit going on right about this time in the country. The country's coming out of this period where every time workers striked, they were murdered and massacred. At this time, you had cop killers galore. You had, Machine Gun Kelly, and at this time, you had gangsters and mobsters and machine guns killing cops galore all over the country. Sounds a little familiar. And you had the Dust Bowl. You had this environmental catastrophe all through the center of the country, and this massive drought that destroyed and reduced food supplies. And all this shit, this angry populace, hungry, and a depression, Dust Bowl whipping across the whole center of the country. Nobody can eat. Everybody's broke, except this 1% is always just pouring in the money. So with all this going on, and again, we're talking about 1929, 1930, so it's not like there was an internet. Information still, even at this point, traveled really slowly. So in the early 1930s, while America was buried in a depression, people were starving, trying to recover from this mass murder, massacre era, and nobody has a job, and the Dust Bowl, and all of these things to distract the American people, and there wasn't that much information out there. It's not like there was nightly news on the TV. And this is when Andrew Mellon does something that many white men have done in their lives. And I'm going to do a podcast in the future about all these trifling asses too. And that's that white man at the very end of their lives, when they know they're on the doorstep of death, they will do the most awful things and break laws and do terrible, 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 terrible things to make them and their friends rich because they know they're about to die. And white men at the end of their lives, over and over again, have done treacherous, awful fucking things, knowing that nobody could do shit to them for it because they're about to step into the deathbed anyway. And that's what Andrew Mellon did. In 1930, after leading, in the early 1930s, after spending half a decade leading the American people directly into a depression, is given control of the nation's drug war, which is created in the early 1930s. This is when the Marijuana Tax Act comes out, and the predecessor to the DEA, the Bureau of Narcotics, was created. And the Bureau of Narcotics, which was going to run the drug war, was put under the control of the Department of Treasury of the Department of Money. So Andrew Mellon was going to run this drug war at the very end of his life from in the 1930s. Andrew Mellon had a niece. If you Google her, you won't find much of shit about her because she's not that famous. She didn't do shit. But in a sense, she's one of the most important people in American history. So Andrew Mellon's niece was a woman named Martha Kind Denniston. And Martha Denniston, her claim to fame was who she married. She married a guy named Harry Anslinger. Now, Harry Anslinger was a fucking scumbag of top shelf order. He is, for my money, one of the 5 worst citizens in the history of the United States. This guy is a piece of shit. What a fucking douchebag, monster, criminal, racist, fucking bigoted sack of shit. So let me tell you a little bit about Harry fucking Anslinger. Andrew, he was married to Martha Kind Denniston, Andrew Mellon's niece. So Andrew Mellon gets handed this Bureau of Narcotics, and he's got to create a fucking drug war under his Department of Treasury, Department of Money. And he hires his niece's husband, Harry Anslinger, to run this shit show. Now, Anslinger's a racist. Now, you might remember back a few minutes ago, I was telling you about how guys like Andrew Mellon and the DuPonts and the J.P. Morgans and the Andrew Carnegies of the world, between the end of the Civil War, like 1865 and the early 1900s, they would hire guns and mercenaries to kill striking workers, massacre entire striking teams and their families, their kids and their wives too, because they always struck together because that they lived where they were striking. And it gets hard to talk about because it is all tied together and it is all really fucked up. So Harry Anslinger, one of his first jobs was he was one of the guys that would go into these camps and murder everybody. And then from there, he did the same thing to the railroad workers. You know, when they had the Chinese building the railroads across the country, it was his job to murder them all the time and blow them up if they didn't do what they were supposed to. He was a terrorist. And then from there, they brought in prohibition. During the prohibition era for alcohol, his job was to go around and beat and arrest people for having a beer. This was Harry Anslinger. And because he was fucking Martha Kind Denniston, Andrew Mellon puts the entire fucking American drug war in this douchebag's lap. And what do you think happened? First off, I encourage you to hit Google and Google Harry Anslinger racist quotes, and then pick a source that you trust and take a look at some of the utterances of this shitbag. This guy, and keep in mind, from the day the Bureau of Narcotics was created until all the way into the 1960s, the late 1960s, Harry Anslinger was the drug czar of this country. Every law, every fucking policy that we had drug-related was Harry fucking Anslinger, the most racist, shitbag, piece of shit, fucking criminal, bigoted sack of shit in the history of humanity. And we put our entire fucking drug war in his lap for 30 fucking years. And he destroyed the fucking country with his fucking drug war. But let's stay focused. Let me stay focused. His fucking drug war, which was implemented in the 30s, was the result of that period between 1865 and 1920, where the racist hillbillies who negotiated their half of the compromise of the 13th Amendment, they had finally figured out how they were going to build their army of slaves that they had to first put in prison. And they were going to do it through this racist fucking drug war and this racist fucking douchebag, Harry Anslinger. And since the 1930s, it's fucking from Billie Holiday all the way up to George Floyd and shit now, about 10 more motherfuckers they done killed already since. All these fucking horseshit warrants, all this I smell weed, all this illegal searches, the fucking bastardization of the Fourth Amendment. They'll pull you over, tell you got a light out, and use that as justification to fucking search you, or the fucking old reliable I smell weed. You could take your I smell weed, Mr. Officer, and shove it straight up your corrupt fucking pooper. You criminal fucking pricks. You've been terrorizing the American people with your horse fucking shit drug war to build you an army of fucking slaves so your little 1% who funded murder and massacre can keep all their fucking money. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that the cop that put his knee on George Floyd, Derek Chauvin. I'm not saying that Derek Chauvin, you can draw a direct line from him to Christopher Columbus. No, it's much more insidious than that. It's a subtle fucking thing that's been going on for 500 fucking years. And it's been steered and manipulated and controlled by white folks who at every fucking step have had their fucking knee on the neck of the African-American population, 450 fucking years. And no matter how long and how ugly they've been doing it, they're more than happy to look you in the face and say, no, we're not doing that shit at all. No, we don't do that. We're not racist. Fuck you and your lies. How fucking stupid do you think we are? You have a 450 fucking year track record of assholery and fucking tyranny and murder and the ugliest fucking shit you could imagine. And yet you still want to look us in the face and tell us, no, you're not doing it. You're doing all of it and more. So Andrew Mellon hires Harry Anslinger, who runs a drug war from the 1930s to the late 1960s, where the Bureau of Narcotics by then had become the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Agency, which to this day still terrorizes America with their horseshit drug war. This happened. Everything I've said to you, I'm not speculating. I'm not making shit up. I encourage you to look up everything I'm saying because it's true and it's real. But it's so fucking insidious that's to think that a murder in 2020 could be with the same motivations and with the same underlying plot and fucking ugliness as 1492. But it absolutely is. Columbus was a race warrior sent here by the church to begin a race war. The requirement, do what we say or we'll kill you. 350 years later, Frederick Douglass clearly and pristinely describes how the church and slavery and oppression are hand in hand. 350 years later, then a civil war, then a 13th Amendment, then a period of massacres of anybody who doesn't do exactly what the rich 1% say, until finally in the early 1900s, they decide that they've figured out exactly how to get them an army of slaves, and they begin a drug war upon the American people, and they set upon them. And then you look today in 2020 and you see these riot warrior knuckleheads out here. Keep in mind that these are people, this is their job. This isn't their life. This is how they make money. And these men get up in the morning, put on this riot gear, knowing that my job today is to go beat the shit out of my brothers and sisters in the street, my fellow citizens. And I'm going to do it on behalf of a state that I damn well know doesn't care about me or them. And I'm going to do all of this for a little change so that I can feed mine. Because these same people learned between 1865 and 1920, because we done been handing this shit down since we learned it, and we learned it good. Every time you didn't go to work, and every time you struck, or every time you didn't do exactly what the powerful said, they slaughtered you and your family. It's a whole fucking laundry list of massacres, 25 years long, just the this and that massacre, the Homestead Massacre, this massacre, that massacre, and it's all just rich white men hiring other white men to murder poor Black, white, and Chinese men, women, and children. And that takes you right up to the drug war. And the rich white man at the end of his life who's going to run a drug war. And keep in mind that the last 5 years of Andrew Mellon's life, he was under constant investigation for crimes. He died under investigation for a whole bunch of crimes. And after he died, they wrote it off and said, oh, he was innocent. But he did all that shit. He evaded taxes. He was a criminal. He was an environmental criminal. He was a fucking murderer. And we still talk about him like he's some fucking hero. Carnegie Mellon University. Fuck Carnegie. Anything with that guy's name on it should be burned at a, I better not say that, should not exist. Anything with Andrew Mellon's name or any of these other rich white motherfuckers, DuPont, JP Morgan, these motherfuckers set a course for this country that we are still trying to dig out of. And really, the racial aspect of this goes back to the fact that there was never a Reconstruction. There was never at the end of the Civil War, what there needed to be was an acknowledgement, what you might call what South Africa did with Truth and Reconciliation. I'm not saying we necessarily had to call it that, but there needed to be an accounting for 400 years of fucking crimes, and an acknowledgement, and some reparations, real reparations. Not some shit here, take this, and then a year later, oh, you're a criminal, so we're going to throw you in jail and take all your stuff because the law says we can, and we turned you into a criminal, and now you're a slave again. Bullshit. Real reparations, real justice. We could have done it in 1865, and we wouldn't be doing this horse shit then, now. But instead, we killed Lincoln, put a racist in to do Reconstruction, and then within 10 years, it was gone and forgotten. And we are still fucking around with this same tired bullshit 150 years later. These fucking ignorant redneck hillbilly KKK motherfuckers steering huge chunks of this country. Which brings me to the last point I want to make on this topic. About 20 years ago, the FBI warned us and we did not listen. Shit, for that matter, the KKK themselves warned us. The KKK recognized that the whole pillowcase over the head, sheets on the horses deal was kind of specifically there, so they became very recognizable, and they wanted to change their public perception. You might call it a marketing campaign for the KKK. And they decided that instead of wearing sheets and terrorizing their neighbors, that they were through cross burnings and shit like that, the KKK got a little more sophisticated, and they decided that instead of cross burnings and wearing sheets, that they would wear cop uniforms and FBI uniforms and politician uniforms and school teacher uniforms, and that they were going to infect every aspect of our society and get into positions of power, and then use those positions of power to inflict damage and harm upon those they hated. And this is the KKK. The KKK told us this, that they were going to do this. And then, of course, the FBI 15 or 20 years ago warned us as well that the KKK had a campaign, a deep and moneyed campaign where they wanted to infiltrate police departments, the FBI, the military, school teaching positions, and they wanted to use these positions to ruin people's lives. And that's exactly what they've done. The ranks of our police departments are littered with men who 25 years ago would have had pillowcases on their heads. And of course, it's obvious as hell that that's the case, but they'll all be happy to look right at you and say, no, that's not what we're doing. That's not true at all. You misunderstand. I don't misunderstand shit. When was the last time you saw a motherfucker kill somebody, and when you ask them, oh yeah, and take them to court, oh yeah, I killed somebody. Fucking criminals don't admit their crimes unless they absolutely have to. Motherfucker isn't gonna fucking commit some racially motivated murder and then, oh yeah, I did that. They're gonna try to get away with it. So they're gonna lie to you. The drug war must end tomorrow. Cannabis must be removed as a Schedule I drug. It needs to be removed from the drug schedule altogether. We need to decriminalize all drugs and treat it for what it is, a medical issue. But what I tell you, I mean, the crux of the matter is this, is that we've been fighting a drug war for coming up on 100 years, and we ain't won shit. We pissed away money on a drug war. We pissed away money on cops. We pissed away money on courts and judges, and it ain't done shit. Fuck your courts. Fuck your petty bullshit racist fucking just us system. Fuck you. Fuck it. Fuck y'all. You've had hundreds of years of tyranny and control, and you've run what should and could be the greatest nation in the history of the world. You've run it into the fucking ground. It's important to note, Because I think sometimes I might say something you think, oh, this guy's left-wing this, and other times I might say this, and oh, he's right-wing that. I am neither left or right. I find both the Republican and Democratic Party completely fucking repugnant. Those two parties have been in control solely, no one else. Those two political parties have been in control of everything this country has been and is for the last 100 years. How are they doing? Throw them all the fuck out and never let them anywhere near this country's systems of justice and law ever again. Here's some of the things that I think need to happen for justice reform to be anything other than bullshit. Qualified immunity has to completely go the fuck away today. Done with it. You commit a crime, you do the time, just like everybody fucking else. You are not special. You are not better. Do the crime, do the time. Qualified immunity, fuck you. Number 2, civil asset forfeiture. Legalized thievery by the state and the pigs. Done. Done today and for fucking ever. I don't care if they done did everything you say they did. Keep your fucking hands off their shit. You don't get to take nobody's shit ever. Because you take it, you sell it, you corrupt it, and you turn it into guns and fucking tanks. You criminal fucking douchebags, you don't know how to act. We gave you responsibility, and you refused accountability. You're fucking criminals. You're worthless to this country. Now you're worse than worthless. If you were worthless, at least you wouldn't be doing any harm. You just wouldn't be doing any good. Now y'all motherfuckers are doing almost no good and fucking reams and reams of harm. You have locked up so many people for bullshit. You've lied in court thousands and thousands of times to send people away. It's almost like y'all don't think shit about freedom. Freedom don't mean shit to y'all. Freedom means something to me. And not for the bullshit fucking reasons that you always hear spouted by these bullshit motherfuckers. Oh, wave the flag and yay, freedom, America. Bullshit. Let me tell you something. Motherfuckers back in the day, 1780s, 1770s, the Revolutionary War, the 1860s, the Civil War, entire families go and lay in a field and die for rights that they'll never see themselves. All the motherfuckers that died in the Revolutionary War would get shot in the field and then slowly lay there and die over the next week while fucking animals bit at them and God knows what else and started to eat their ass while they slowly died from bullet holes. Because there were no fucking help coming. No goddamn field doctors. They were dying for some shit they were never going to taste themselves. They were dying for a constitution. They were dying for a Bill of Rights. They were dying to get rid of fucking tyranny. And they died in fucking droves and never tasted it themselves. They died so that you could taste freedom. And me. So that you and me and all of us could taste freedom. And we shit on the deaths of these people when we treat freedom like it don't mean shit. When you take someone's freedom away from them because you're in a bad mood, or because your wife didn't fuck you last night, or because your kid got an F. And you're going to go to work and you're going to pick an American citizen and you're going to change their life forever because you're in a bad fucking mood. Or worse yet, because you have a fucking quota. Some fucking white lawyer told you you got to arrest somebody today. So whether you find somebody worthy of arrest or not, you're going to find somebody to throw in a fucking cage because your precious fucking job. Just doing my job. Fuck your job. Fuck your job straight up its ass, and fuck you and your ass too for doing it. I mean, at some point, doesn't your internal fucking moral compass have to kick on? And don't you have to say, they're asking me to ruin people's lives for $20 an hour. Should I really be doing this? Should I fuck? Because you damn well know, and you know, and I've heard y'all say this shit, that you might beat the charge, but you'll never beat the ride. You just want to sling charges against the wall so that money gets thrown into your fucking precious justice system. Because every charge you throw at somebody, you know it's just more they're going to have to pay an attorney. And the attorney ain't even picking up the phone for less than $2,000. And now, you know, they got to go to court. Now you're $4,000. So now you already know that half of America can't defend themselves against a justice system because they're just priced right the fuck out of it. And y'all know that. So you go out hunting And you go out hunting and looking for folks that look like they can't afford $4,000 for a fucking attorney. And then you trample right on their fucking rights so that you can have a job. You throw them in cages to the tune of the largest prison population in the history of humankind. Yeah, that's us. Are we that bad? Are we so much worse than any other place on earth that we just got to lock motherfuckers up all the time because we're just all so shitty? I don't think so. I don't fucking think so. I think we're locking motherfuckers up so we could turn them into goddamn slaves, and these rich motherfuckers can use them to make their fucking packages and their fucking license plates or whatever the fuck else they got them doing. Criminal motherfuckers. I'll say it again. Criminal motherfuckers. If I was in charge, world wouldn't look at all like it does right now, let me tell you that. All these criminal motherfuckers were going to see. We might still have a large prison population if I was in charge, but the right motherfuckers would be in jail if I was in charge. Motherfuckers that for 200 years been ass raping our environment, ass raping our economy. There's like 9 fucking guys that have everything, and the rest of us got to fucking throat punch each other for a nickel. Competing from the day we're born to the day we die. In school, we compete for grades. We compete for fucking scholarships. We compete for jobs. We compete for mates. We're just constantly competing against each other. And it's also our precious economy can chug on. Fuck your precious economy. Economy comes in like 9th for me. Let's start with fucking people. And let's start with people that are healthy, happy, and safe. Let's start with that. And then once we get that, we can go to all the other things. And then down like 9th or 10th, we can worry about fucking. In 1955, an activist in Brookhaven, Mississippi named Lamar Smith was murdered in broad daylight at about 10 in the morning right in front of the courthouse there in Lincoln County, Mississippi. I think it's Lincoln County, Mississippi. Brookhaven, Mississippi for sure. Lamar Smith was a World War I vet. As a young man, he went and fought in World War I for his country. Came back to a Mississippi that didn't love him, didn't want him, as you might imagine, Mississippi. So in 1955, and when he came back from the war, he did good things with his time. He worked as an activist. He tried to get, he was one of the founders of African-American Voting League. And he had, every time there was an election, he went out and registered black folks to vote, which, as you might imagine, didn't make many of the white folks in Mississippi happy about that in 1955 Mississippi. So he's got some paperwork in his hand for some absentee ballots, because one of the slick ideas that Lamar Smith had was when black folks tried to vote in 1955 Mississippi, on voting day, they'd show up to the polls and there'd be white boys with guns trying to intimidate them, scare them away. Made it really difficult for black folks to vote in 1955 Mississippi. So Lamar Smith had the creative idea of having all these people well in advance file for absentee ballots and vote by mail via absentee ballots to avoid these terrorism tactics and get their voices heard. So once the white folks in Mississippi kind of learned that he had been doing this for a while, this particular election when he was murdered in 1955 was important because it was a runoff election, and his candidate, which no one thought could win, got enough of the votes to require a runoff election where Lamar Smith then began to work extra hard to get his candidate in. And the white folks were having none of it. So so he walks up to the courthouse with all his absentee ballots, and a white boy, Noah Smith, walks up to him in front of hundreds of people in broad daylight at 10 in the morning and shoots his ass dead. Now Noah Smith, the guy that shot him dead, covered in blood in front of all kinds of people, including the sheriff who was present when Lamar Smith was murdered. And the sheriff, whose last name is Smith as well. And I've been investigating this for a while, and I've yet to be able to determine whether the sheriff and Noah Smith, the guy who shot Lamar, was actually, if they were related, whether the shooter and the sheriff were related. So there was 3 men involved in the shooting, 2 to kind of attack him and the 3rd that shot him. And the sheriff watched the whole thing. and did nothing. And ultimately, later on, did a little something, but it was all dog and pony show. And ultimately, it came to a grand jury. Now, for those of you that don't know, a grand jury is really bullshit. It's a tool for prosecutors, district attorneys to use to hold themselves blameless. Let me give you an example. Let's say there's a criminal that they really want to get. Because you have to understand, with the grand jury, it's done in complete secrecy. So nobody knows what's said. Nobody knows what goes on in there. It's complete secrecy. The other thing that's important is that the prosecutor controls the entire narrative. He decides what information is presented there, what information isn't, and how it's presented. Entirely the prosecutor's show. So if the prosecutor wants somebody to be convicted, they will be convicted, or the grand jury will indict them in a trial. But the whole point of a grand jury is for a prosecutor to use it the way they want. If they want a conviction, they get a conviction. And if they don't want a conviction, they'll never get it. And that's what they've been doing for years now with these black murders. District attorneys, just that they do. Four cops murder on video a black man, and it's obviously fucking murder. But the district attorney doesn't want to be responsible for charging these four cops with murder. So he calls a grand jury where in secret he gets to present whatever he wants to this grand jury. He doesn't want these four cops to go to jail. He works with them every day. So he calls this grand jury, and in secret he tells the grand jury whatever the fuck he wants, which is steering them exactly towards what he wants, which is for these four cops to get off, or these cops to get off, and they do it over and over. They call these grand juries, which are completely secret, and then they steer the proceedings in such a way that the cops always get off. But if you and I end up in a grand jury, every fucking time that same prosecutor's getting a fucking indictment. The only time prosecutors and district attorneys can't get indictments with grand juries is when it's cops. And it's because they decide everything that goes on with that grand jury, and it's all in secret. So if they want a conviction, they get one, and if they don't, they don't. So they called this grand jury for this Lamar Smith the murder in Brookhaven, Mississippi in 1955. And the grand jury consists of 20 white people. And overwhelming evidence. 3 white men walk up to him broad daylight. But of course, this is Mississippi, so none of the witnesses would say anything. Effectively, a pack of white witnesses who all would not say a word. And even with all the physical evidence and the sheriff witnessing it himself, this grand jury with this dog and pony horseshit show, they all the killers got off, and Lamar Smith got no justice for his murder in front of the courthouse at 10 in the morning in broad daylight in Brookhaven, Mississippi in 1955. And you might be asking yourself, why the fuck are you telling this bullshit story? You ain't got shit to do with shit. And it's because I want to contrast Lamar Smith's death in 1955 in Brookhaven, Mississippi, with Anthony Lamar Smith's death in, I believe it was 2016 in St. Louis, Missouri. So we're 60-ish years apart on these murders. One's in, racist capital of the world, Mississippi, and the other one in progressive northern city of St. Louis. Both gentlemen, same name, Lamar Smith, 1955, Brookhaven, Mississippi. Anthony Lamar Smith, 2016, St. Louis, Missouri. Anthony Lamar Smith, and it pains me to say this, well, first off, the cops never should have been fucking with him anyway. He was parked outside of a restaurant. I forget if it was a White Castle or maybe a Chick-fil-A or some fast food joint. He was parked outside the fast food joint, and he went in, came back out, went in, came back out. That's what the cops claim they saw. And because of that, they pulled into the parking lot, parked behind him so he couldn't get out. And they were presuming that it was a drug deal, and they were trying to bust him for drugs. And this is all written in the report after the fact. But you and I both know that they rolled up on this guy in a parking lot, and they were going to terrorize him, and they didn't know if he had done anything wrong or not. They lied. So Anthony Lamar Smith runs and in his car, and Jason Stokely, the cop that murdered Anthony Lamar Smith, is chasing him. And I believe he was in the passenger seat of the cop car, and there was another cop driving. And as they're chasing him, it was a short chase, a couple minutes at most. And while the police were chasing Anthony Lamar Smith, Jason Stokely, the man who ultimately murdered Anthony Lamar Smith, says on radio, plain as fucking day, we're murdering this kid. You know that, right? We're murdering him. He tells you he's going to murder him. So finally, they run him off the road. And Stokely goes up to the car, and there's like a long pause. And then he just murders him, shoots him 5 times dead. And there was another cop's video running, and about 5 minutes after he shoots him dead, you see Jason Stokely go to his car, get a plant gun, and plant a gun on Anthony Lamar Smith. He murdered this kid. He planted a gun on this kid. And then they stuck some white Missouri judge on the case who did everything he fucking could to look the other way at reality. You know, because again, they'll fucking be racist as fuck, murder you right on film, being racist as fuck, and then look you right in the eyes and say, no, I didn't do it. That's not what happened. They've been doing it for 450 years. We're not racist. There's no race war. Everything's equal. Fuck you. At least have the balls to be a monster and admit it. Don't be a fucking monster and then try to pretend like you're fucking Mother Teresa, you sacks of fucking human shit. So, of course, this judge, after doing a fucking ridiculous dance through reality, finds his little bullshit path to justify Jason Stokely's fucking murder of Anthony Lamar Smith and let him off. Mississippi, 1955. St. Louis, 2016. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't fucking matter. Lamar Smith or Anthony Lamar Smith. If you're a black man in America, South, North, small town, big city, it doesn't fucking matter. There's always a prosecutor, a judge, a DA, some fucking lab tech. There's always somebody in some link in the chain willing to tell a lie big enough to put you away. And they don't all got to lie. They don't all got to fucking fix the system or rig it. Just one. Like Annie Dukin. Annie Dukin was a scientist. She was a lab tech up in Boston. And she got to the top of her lab, was running a lab for years in Boston. And her lab was like, whenever the cops would find something, you know, they'd send whatever it was they found to the lab, say, is this Coke or is this flour? Is this pot or is this oregano? But the same thing with, drug tests for like people on probation. Is this clean or is it dirty? Same thing with like criminal evidence. Whose fingerprints are on this gun? Whose fingerprints are on this knife? And the whole time she was running this lab, she was faking the results. And every time she was faking the results just to throw motherfuckers in jail. She spent like 10 years running a lab where her whole purpose in life was just locking up innocent motherfuckers. They would send them bags of cocaine that were flour, and she would say they were cocaine just to send an innocent motherfucker to jail. And she did that for years. Years. And the best they can come up with is, oh, we'll review and take a look. And fuck your review and fuck your look. You got what you wanted. You got your army of fucking slaves, innocent people, thrown in cages for complete horse shit. Because another link in your chain was corrupt as fuck. And it's, what did she gain? What the fuck? And a lot of people say that she did it because she wanted to get promoted. Oh, but if you're getting promoted, and if the criminal justice system is promoting people just for throwing people in boxes without any measure or account of the fact of whether they were actually guilty or not, or whether those people actually, any justice was actually divvied up, then you're fucked up. Your system is fucked up. It's like these fucking attorneys with their conviction rate. Does it even matter to you whether you convicted people who did something or not? Or is it just about your precious fucking conviction rate and your precious fucking promotions, your job? Because you got to get that money. Got to get that money. Fucking whores. You would ass rape your grandmothers for nickels. You fucking whores. This might be a good time for me to mention that go back to American history. Go back. Take a look at the last 100 years worth of politicians, both Republican and Democrat, everything from your local fucking alderman or city council, all the way up to the president. Every political, senators, congressmen, all of it. And for 100 years, go back. Every congressman, every senator, every president, every alderman, every fucking city council for 100 years back, no matter where the fuck you look, anywhere in the country, and you'll see that almost every one of them are lawyers. Every judge, every prosecutor, every district attorney, our ridiculous fucking tax laws, our ridiculous fucking drug laws, our ridiculous fucking justice system, all the corruption, all the horse shit, all the ruination of our country, all written, controlled, and manipulated by lawyers. All those politicians, 100 years, they're all fucking lawyers. Every politician's a fucking lawyer. All the DAs, obviously, lawyers, judges, lawyers. They're all fucking lawyers. And they've driven our country right into the ground with their legal mumbo jumbo and this idea that, oh, well, justice isn't the end. Justice isn't what we seek in the criminal justice system. Well, maybe it fucking should be. Maybe it fucking should be, because what you've been looking for hasn't worked, and you've ruined the fucking country. You've worked as a fucking crime syndicate. Judges, district attorneys, prosecutors, fucking even defense lawyers to a large degree, because they're the fucking plea deal. They're only one is plea. Just keep churning the wheels of fucking injustice. Just throw them in, plea them out, take their money, spin them back out. Fucking pathetic. And you designed this. These were your ideas, Mr. and Mrs. Lawyers, Mr. and Mrs. Lawyer politicians, Mr. and Mrs. Lawyer district attorneys, and fucking prosecutors. Pack of fucking criminals. You've bastardized every good thing about this country so that you could have a couple extra bucks. Sorry, motherfuckers. The whole lot of you. So if I was running things, a whole bunch of lawyers would be sitting in fucking cages. And let's talk about all the black folks that have been murdered over the last 15 years who never got justice. Tamir Rice, and not just black folks, American citizens. Tamir Rice, John Crawford. The idea that no one went to jail for John Crawford's murder, I can't fucking believe it. He was in a store holding a product from that store that he was attempting to purchase, and while continuing to shop, holding his purchases, he was shot in cold fucking blood by a pack of wolves, pack of animal dog fucking cops who didn't think enough of his life to even try to find out what was going on. Just show up, shoot him, figure it out later. Because they know that by doing that, by killing them and we'll figure it out later, that figure it out later is code for you'll never be held accountable. How the fuck can the murderers of John Crawford still be walking around? So John Crawford, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling, fucking Kelly fucking Thomas. Now there's a case. Oh my God. The cops stood over him menacingly and slowly put gloves on his hand while he told him he was going to kill him. And then proceeded to drag him into the middle of the street and kill him with his bare hands, him and about 7 of his buddies. The guy never so much as lifted a hand towards them. He was seated at a seat at a bus station, and they lorded over him while he sat there scared to death. And they lorded over him, and he slowly put those gloves over him while he stood over him, saying, I'm about to beat you to death, or whatever the fuck he said, and then proceeded to do just that. Told him he was going to kill him, and then exactly did that. On video. Somehow that wasn't wrong either. How many murders do they think we should watch before we say something's wrong? Like, they talk that shit about see something, say something. Oh, is it only when my neighbor does it? But when y'all criminal motherfuckers kill people right in front of me, I'm supposed to suck my thumb and pretend I don't see it? We done been doing that shit for hundreds of fucking years. While y'all just fill graveyards and fill prisons with people that ain't done shit. You have bastardized justice. And in the course of doing so, you have ruined the fucking country. Nobody has any faith in us anymore. And don't talk to me about Donald Trump. This shit ain't got shit to do with Donald Trump. Now, don't misunderstand. He's a jag-off of epic proportions and a punk bitch, and I'd like to slap him from one side of the country to the other. You punk bitch. You're one of the rich 1% motherfuckers that have stifled America for 400 fucking years. You're no better than Andrew Mellon or Carnegie or any of the other massacre, murdering, fucking trifling, money-stealing bitches. Actually, you're a little worse because you're such a punk bitch on top of everything else. You fucking bone spurs. You talk like you respect soldiers. You're a bitch. You're afraid to fight. You're a bitch. When your country called for you to fight, you got daddy's money and to buy a bunch of doctors to write bullshit notes because you're a bitch. You're a fat, soft, punk bitch. And God, I'd love to whip your fucking ass. Punk bitch. But this ain't about Donald Trump. This is 500 fucking years of horse shit. And Donald Trump is a symptom. He's a symptom of 500 years of fucking sickness that we've ignored and let fester. Racists, lawyers, bastardizing the justice that our brothers and sisters, our families bled and died for. And they didn't, and I want to make sure you remember that these motherfuckers didn't die for like easy, comfortable deaths. Like maybe someone gets shot in the head and they're dead right away. But a lot of these motherfuckers get shot 2-3 times in the shoulder, the neck, and the leg, and then they'd slowly die for 3 fucking days in a field while fucking coyotes come and eat them at night. That's the kind of deaths that bought us freedom, and not 1 or 2 of them. Let me tell you about a battle that happened during the Civil War. Back in the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, they used to wear all that ridiculous shit, like those belts across that had the little metal giant buckles all over them across their jackets and shit. And in really dry conditions, when motherfuckers would get shot, they would sparks would come off their metal belt buckles that were all over them. And motherfuckers would be lying in these dry fields, slowly dying from being shot, and still bullets flying, and fires would start. Because the bullets would click and spark off the metal of the dead man laying around in the grass or in the woods, and those sparks would create fire. So now half the men that are wounded, laying, slowly dying in a field, now are going to burn to death on top of their wounds. And these are the kind of deaths that bought your and I's freedom. The fact that we should be allowed to walk down the street without a produce ID to every armed thug who wants, where you going? What you doing? Where's your ID? And then, of course, they want to run a computer check to see if you've ever done anything wrong, which brings me to another fucking point. This idea of your record. I am so fucking in a goddamn local news, the way they parrot this horse shit. You'll hear it all the time. Cops will stop somebody walking down the street and then take their ID, even though they ain't done nothing and there's no probable cause. They shouldn't be talking to them at all. They stop and they start poking around. They take their ID, immediately run it through the computer and check. Oh, you got a record. You done resisted arrest or whatever. And that's it. And then they use that as justification to terrorize them some more because you got arrested for pot or whatever. And we see it here on our trusty computer. Fuck your computer and fuck you. Because first off, all that shit you see, all this, like where cops are coming to beat up a fucking protester and then arrest them for assault. That's the kind of shit that causes people to have records. And then they use those records to get them again, hurt them some more. Oh, you did this thing, so now you must, every time there's something, it's you. And they use that as justification to search them illegally and to terrorize people. The Fourth Amendment is very fucking clear. This idea that I smell pot is now like an invitation to search anybody you want. That is the bastardization of freedom. And that doesn't happen by accident. That was a concerted effort of a fucking big pack of criminals and 1%ers and fucking lawyers who just want to continue to hurt you and turn you into slaves. 13th Amendment ain't no joke. It's a big fat fucking lie. And they've been using it to terrorize, and not just the drug war. Don't misunderstand. There's a legion of petty laws that they've since created after the drug war to use to create slaves. Like they'll get resisting arrest and fucking, and it'll be the only charge. How can I resist arrest if I wasn't under arrest for anything first? There's got to be something, but they're not, and it's all just bullshit. It's just making quotas and building, creating slaves. It's slave building. And they send their army of slave catchers out day after day, arm them to the teeth like they're about to invade Nazi Germany, give them fucking tanks and machine guns. We've let it go on too long. We've had our freedoms taken to such a degree that we might not have enough power to ever get them back. But if we're ever going to do it, now is the time. For the first time in my life, there's that I'm aware of, there's a fully engaged 100% across the board populace. They may not all agree, but they're all fucking engaged. And if we sit down and we talk a little bit and we listen a little bit, we don't have to be this racist embarrassment of a country. We can be what we claim to be for real. as opposed to this fucking facade of propaganda that we put out about being the greatest, the number one, while really being complete and utter shit. Let us be the greatness that we claim to be. And let us start with our justice system and our political system, filled with corrupt, criminal, murderous, massacring, lying judges, lawyers, politicians. We can do without them. There's a better way. I don't care what it is. I'm not saying that there's one way. I don't care what we switch to, but I know it can't be this. This doesn't work. This hasn't worked. Hasn't worked for anybody but about 12 guys, 12 old white men, and everybody else is fucked. They have all the money. They have all the power. They control the fucking media and the message. This is Eat, Fuck, Kill, the podcast premiere, number 1. Check out with me next time. I'm going to talk about a little more about the drug war, and I'm going to talk about, we're going to catch up. We're going to go on to what's going on today, and I'm going to bring up some specific instances of stuff happening today in protests and these murderous thugs and the horse shit that they're pulling. And we're going to do that in our next podcast here in the next few days. Thanks for checking out Eat, Fuck, Kill. I'm Massavana Satori Wabi-Sabi. Peace.